Coming up on this episode of the Upper One Podcast, I've got a lot to catch up on, so I'm going to get right to it, as well as a local homesteader that sparked my interest because of a TV show.
And now, podcasting from the great state of Alaska, this is the Upper One Podcast.
Pretty sick, huh?
All right, thanks again for joining me. This is episode 42, and I'm going to get to the subject here in a minute, but let me just catch you up real quick and try not to be as long-winded as I thought I would be. Just to catch up for what's been going on, let's start with the Arctic Comic Con. Last year, I got to meet Victoria again and actually spend some time with her, listening to her stories of wrestling and this and that, as well as a guy by the name of Ming Chen, who's a super funny guy. He's a podcaster. He's got ties to Jay and Silent Bob, if you watch those shows. And then I also got to meet and get a couple autographs of Anthony Michael Hall. You've seen him in The Breakfast Club, Weird Science, and then one of my 80s favorites, Six Pack with Kenny Rogers. So, well, this year I kind of got my wind blown out of the sails because I had been looking forward to it. He had signed and agreed to come up here, but then kind of several weeks beforehand, I guess he got a job with another show that he was going to be filming, and it kind of interfered with coming up here. So, that's his job. But Ryan Hurst, let me start by saying his dad's name is Rick. And if you're like me and you spent hours and hours and hours watching the Daisy Dukes and the General Lee and Roscoe P. Coltrane, Rick Hurst was Deputy Cletus, who I believe in the story was a cousin or something to Boss Hogg. Well, Ryan Hurst is his son. He was in the movie Remember the Titans. He was Gary Bertier, the Denzel Washington movie. He's the one that got in the car accident at the end and did not get to play in the state championship game. He was also Opie in Sons of Anarchy, and most recently, the show that I really love is The Walking Dead. He was Beta. If you've seen my costume here this last year, I dressed up as Beta. So, I was going to the Comic-Con, going to dress up as Beta and go interact with Ryan Hurst. But unfortunately, like I said, he had to cancel. But I did get to meet Rikishi, who, another one, I'm a big wrestling fan. Rikishi's got ties into the Samoan dynasty that's going on with the bloodline and the stories on the WWE right now. So I sat down and listened to him talk and tell stories, which was very interesting, just to see them out of character and just telling their stories. And, they tell their stories about, being on the road and wrestling and, whatever it was, 2000 pay-per-view where The Undertaker, he didn't really choke slam him because you couldn't really choke slam him, but he pushed him off the cage. Unfortunately, that he had the truck with the hay bales and the hay there to land in, and so he didn't really get hurt. But he talked about that. Speaking of The Walking Dead, there was a guy by the name of Cooper Andrews that was here. He was in that show. He was also in the movie Shazam. He was the foster father. So I got to talk to him, just say a couple words with him, and pretty cool dude. And then Seth Gilliam, who I was kind of excited. He was the preacher in The Walking Dead, as well as Sweet Williams or whatever his name was in the Starship Troopers movie, which actually was like one of my brother's favorites. Casper Van Dien and Gary Busey's son was in that. But yeah, so I got him to autograph a picture for my brother because Kevin was he really liked that show. Then another guy, like I said, who has ties to Jay and Silent Bob. His name is Ming Chen. He's got his own podcast. He does podcasting, and I actually talked to him last year and was going to do some stuff with him on, do an interview with him on the podcast, but things just kind of got out of hand with time and commitments and stuff, because Ming was actually hosting the panels where all the guests would come up and talk for 45 minutes or so. So I didn't get to do that this year. But something in the past I talked about was meeting John Schneider. John was up here for, I believe he was up here for the Comic-Con. He might not have been, but it was at the same time. And he put on a concert at the Hard Rock Cafe downtown that I went to and got my 1984 John Schneider cassette tape signed. But after that concert, when we were walking back, we kind of bumped into, and we were walking shoulder to shoulder, the wife and I, as we were walking back to the car with Flash Gordon from back in the day, like when I was a little kid, Sam Jones. So we got to talk to him, and I just seen that it was kind of confirmed that he's coming for next year, as well as Jason Mewes, which I think he's got ties, like I said, with Ming Chen. But I believe Jason was the J of the Jay and Silent Bob, and Ming is partnered or something with the Silent Bob guy. So, but that's confirmed for next year's Arctic Comic Con. So we're looking forward to seeing who else they bring up here. And a part of the Comic Con was the 907 Wrestling Academy. They got to do some instruction and show people a little bit of what they do to, as professional wrestlers and the work that they put in. And then after the Comic-Con Saturday was a wrestling show, which was actually pretty good. So I stayed for that and had a pretty good time. Some more news, like I said, one of the big things up here is the Iditarod. And this year he set a record. He's a 6-time champ, Dallas Seavey. There's some history that he just did as well that, with becoming an Iditarod champion for the first time was, I think he and his father, and I can't remember his grandfather, they set history of, father, son, grandfather in the family. It was along with the Reddingtons and then the Mackeys. With that being said, on some sad note, former Iditarod champion Lance Mackey, he passed away a few years ago from cancer. His brother, I believe, won as well, and he just most recently passed away. So the Iditarod families was grieving for that. But let's get back to Dallas. There is some controversy with Dallas's win this year because, you're out in the wild, racing across the tundra and hills and stuff, the wilds of Alaska in February, in the middle of the night. Sometimes you run into wild animals, and mostly it's going to be moose. Well, Dallas got tangled up with the moose. He had to dispatch the moose, and the Iditarod committee, they docked him 2 hours time because of the rules state that you are allowed to dispatch an animal if you're in fear for your life or your dog's life, and if you have to. But the rules state that you don't have to pack the meat, you don't have to clean it and do that, but you have to gut the animal. And according to the Iditarod, they said that he only spent 10 minutes there doing that. And part of that reason is the rules say that if any mushers come up behind a musher that has had to dispatch an animal, they're supposed to help. They're supposed to stop and help, and then they're supposed to let that first musher go on, so that there's no advantage. You're not supposed to just go on by like a rubbernecker and gain an advantage over your competitors. So, but apparently they said 10 minutes, and so they docked him 2 hours, which to me I think is a little outrageous. Granted, you're in the middle of the night maybe, and you don't know what's going on. There could be wolves or something, but I think it could have taken less time to do that. But I think for Dallas's mindset, he was worried about his dog because one of them got trampled pretty good. And, when they got to that next checkpoint, they stuck that dog on a plane and sent it back here to Anchorage and to get care. But the bottom line is Dallas won, 6-time champ. And, that 2-hour dock and time didn't really matter because he actually won by 3 hours. So in my math, if it's right, you dock a guy 2 hours, so he's 2 hours behind, but he wins by 3 hours. That's a 5-hour makeup, right? I mean, think about it. But either way, that 2 hours didn't matter. There's a little controversy. I don't know if certain people are going to look at it this way and put an asterisk by this win, like they have done in other sports with like home run records. Or, in my opinion, if they'd done that on a home run record, they could do it on a Hall of Fame induction for another certain guy that's banned. But, I'm getting off subject, but yeah, I don't know where the controversy is going to be with Dallas. But again, 6-time champ, set a record. Nobody else has won it more than 5 times because he tied that the last time he won, which was last year. Congratulations to Dallas. I want to be talking about him again here in a little bit. Previous episodes, setting snowfall records, right? Well, the total record for snowfall in Anchorage is 134.5 inches. I believe that's somewhere right around 11 feet. As of April 12th or something like that, or sometime, I don't remember the date. We were at 132.6 inches, which was 1.9 inches of the record. And I don't think we've gotten any recordable snow since then. So we did not set the record for most in a year, but the other records are still there. With that being said, there's hardly any snow on the ground anymore other than the nasty piles that everybody's built up over the year. They have not done anything to help spread it out to get it to melt. But one of the things the wife has been getting lottery tickets for the Alaska Lottery, and the Alaska Lottery is only you can be up here, you can be a visitor, but you have to be in the state to buy a ticket. You can't buy it from outside. I'm pretty sure that's how it is. I don't think it's just the Alaska resident. I think you have to be here to buy a ticket. Well, anyhow, this last lottery, nobody won. So what it is a chase the ace. You buy a ticket. They're $2 tickets, right? So for $2 you can win millions. Well, you drop the price in them tickets if you buy a few more. So when Shanna buys them, it's usually $100. You get 200 tickets. Well, that makes your odds a little better. We've done it twice. We haven't won nothing, but it's called the Chase the Ace. So what you do is you buy a lottery ticket, and each week they have a jackpot. And right now it's about $250,000. And then if they draw your ticket, you automatically win that $250,000, somewhere right around that, those aren't the exact numbers, but somewhere around $250,000. Then you get the chance to open a window, and they put 54 cards up. It's like playing cards. Imagine there's a couple jokers and then the whole rest of the deck. 13 cards, 4 suits. So 2 jokers, that would be 54 cards. Well, the point being is you chase the ace. So you have to flip over the ace of spades. And if you do that, you win the big jackpot, which going into this Sunday is going to be somewhere around $9.5 million. So that's what we're at. Every once in a while, like I said, Shanna will buy $100 worth of tickets and with the chance to flip that ace of spades over, hopefully. So there's that. Another exciting news was, I don't remember the date, but since the onset of that scamdemic, we've had an unhoused problem. To me, they're still homeless because they don't live in a house, but they call them unhoused. They're trying to be correct. But they were using our Sullivan Arena as a shelter. Well, they've since got that cleaned up, which I don't know his title, but he's kind of like a project manager. He's head of doing things and getting things back in order. But my buddy Brock Lindo, the former lead singer of 36 Crazy Fists, current lead singer of Paradise Slaves, amongst other things he does. He's the lead singer for the Alice in Chains tribute band Them Bones, which he kicks ass on. But yeah, he's been doing that. Well, they just had had hockey back in the Sullivan Arena finally after X amount of years. It was an NHL Legends games where we had some older guys come up and play. We've even had a few of our local Aces players play against them and with them. I did not attend that. I think I had other things going on, but we've got things back. It's the Sullivan Arena is happening again. They've got Leonard Skinnard coming in September. The family members that kept that band going after the plane crash in the 70s. I was hoping to go to it, but unfortunately, we will be out of town and out of state at that time. Our previous episode was about the White Raven, and I talked about, the way the years go, where the ravens are, they stick around, and then at a certain point in time, they disappear for, mating and all that nesting and all that stuff. Well, this bird is not that old. I don't think it's into the mating portion of its life yet. Hasn't gotten that far. But it's no longer in Anchorage. One of my buddies, Mike, that has been out taking pictures of it, told me, I saw him one day a couple weeks ago, and he said, yeah, there's already pictures of it back down on the peninsula in the Kenai Soldotna area. So it's flown back to wherever it came from. Hopefully it'll come back up here this next year. But for the summer, I think it's already disappeared and she gone. I've got some other exciting news. As the school year's out, my two kids, they finished up their freshman year. I don't know where they sit with the next year. I don't know what they're doing with all that yet, but their freshman year is done and over with. They just had a pep assembly where my daughter Kaylee was, when they're singing the national anthem, they put people out with sign language, and she got to do the sign language for the national anthem. And I'm still waiting to see. She told me that one of her friends was going to video it, so I'm still waiting to see if that has happened and be able to watch it. So if I do get it, I'll ask her if she minds if I post it, if I can post it on here to show you. Now getting back to Dallas and the other things going on, I did attend on April 30th. I did attend the Alaska Sports Hall of Fame ceremony, which is the first time I got to do that. It was pretty cool. Bobby Hill got represented for his achievements in what he's done for the sports in the state of Alaska. Alyssa Peely was inducted as well. She was a local standout high school player. She just finished her senior year for the Utah Utes. Is it the Utes? Yeah. Because I think Utah State is the Aggies. But anyhow, she played basketball there, which she just came back up here for the Alaska shootout, the women's shootout. And I think her team won. It was a big deal. They made a big deal. But what's really cool is last year, her brother was drafted by the Miami Dolphins, Brandon. And then this year, she was first round, 8th pick overall by the Minnesota Lynx. for the WNBA. She was drafted, so that's kind of cool. But like I said, the other thing was Scotty Gomez. His 2000 Rookie of the Year moment was inducted as well, and then Dallas Seavey. So I got to spend some time and grab a couple pictures with all of them for that. And as I said it before, I could be a part of that too, and I'm not doing it taking credit for being a part of it because it hasn't been inducted into as a moment yet. But there were times where you could go on a vote, and I don't know why they changed it or what they've changed it to or how it's going to get in. But my senior year, we lost the state championship to East and Trajan Langdon by 2 points in triple overtime, which is still to this day probably the greatest game that's ever been played in high school basketball in Alaska. And like I said, I'm not tooting my horn. I only scored 2 points to it, but I can be a part of that Sports Hall of Fame if that's ever inducted into it, as there were chances of it prior. So that's that for the Sports Hall of Fame. It was very exciting. It was cool to be a part of. Some other kids. There's one gal that has ran the Mount Marathon race in Seward on the 4th of July several times, and she's won it. I mean, like, she dominated. Now on to, as I always talk about, hockey's over. I missed a couple months of the season, and I tried to come back. Things just didn't feel right during the playoffs. I played one game, and that was it. But season's over. Team lost the second round, and that's that. I think the next time I'll be playing is if I can get out and shake some of the rust off this summer. I might do it a couple times. But I do have a draft tournament coming up the first weekend of August, which means you put your skill level down when you register, and then they put you in that pot. So like let's say beginning, intermediate, advanced, and the teams are only allowed to pick X amount of players out of each division, each pot, and that way it's called a draft tournament. So that way you're not stacking the teams, and you've got equal skill levels playing against each other. And so I'm kind of looking forward to that. I mean, I am looking forward to that because a friend of mine put me onto it, and I had actually my previous job, the guy that hired me, he's a softball player, and he's gone across the country to play softball draft tournaments, as well as my buddy Corey with the hockey tournament. So we'll see how this goes, because maybe that might lead to something in the future. Like there's some in Vegas. I'd love to go down and play in Vegas because they play inside I think it's the practice facility where the Golden Knights and the Silver Knights play in Henderson there. So we'll see where that comes. Last but not least, Special O, floor hockey. We did play the locals tournament for the qualifiers. My team, we beat Bobby Hill's team 5-4 in the locals, and then we went on to state where there were teams from, as I go across the whole board, not just the unified partners or the unified teams, but the regular traditional teams as well. There was teams from Kodiak. There was teams from the southeast, Ketchikan, I believe. There was the Wasilla, Palmer, Matsu teams, and then there was teams from Fairbanks, the Tanana Valley. So with that being said, my team, we won. We beat Bobby Hill's team again for the championship. So the Anchorage teams took first and second. They took the gold and silver. This time we beat them 9-2. I did have one player. This is going back to something I just talked about. He's the cousin of Scotty Gomez. He was on my team, and I was paired with him for the defensive. We were on our defensive line, and we kind of had a little strategy that we worked up with one of our wingers, and it turned out in our favor. So that's that for catching up. I'm going to come back, and I want to talk about Russian Jack. All right, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. I had to take the break, go let the dogs out. They were getting a little jumpy and zoomy. I guess that's the new word, right? Zoomy. So as I stated, this is the 42nd episode, and I'm going to tie in a little bit of my favorite TV show, one of my favorite TV shows, to this character who has a lot of history. I think it's a lot of history. It's only over a short time, but, within the Anchorage area. And just to make this short, like I said, I'm not going to get long-winded because this article was probably going to take a half an hour to read. But back in the early 1900s, a gentleman by the name of Jacob Maruninko, who was originally from a little village called Perievka, Ukraine, which is southwest of Kiev. He came to Anchorage, basically. He was born October of 1883, got married and had a couple kids, but then this article says for something caused him to leave and he never returned. He was an immigrant. He came over to the North American continent somewhere around 1912 or 1915. Some of them say April 1915, but others say that he landed in Halifax, Canada in April of 1912 under the alias of John Martian, which later would be his name that he went by throughout his time over here. So this thing says that the 1951 Declaration of Intention of Naturalization indicates that he first traveled on a Canadian Pacific Railway train south from Canada to Blaine, Washington. So it goes on to say that he came to arrive in Anchorage in 1915, and he was a railroad worker on the construction of the Alaska Railroad. And then he had a draft card for World War I, dated October 24th, 1918. States that he was a laborer employed by the AEC, which is the Alaskan Engineering Commission, and that his wife lived in Kiev. The 1920 U.S. Census lists him with the new name Jack Martian, and that's the name he is known by for the rest of his life. It also says that he could read and write. He also owned a cabin but had not obtained U.S. citizenship. He was the proprietor of the Montana Pool Room located in 435 4th Avenue, which he either lost or disposed of because he could not obtain a legal title as a non-U.S. citizen. It also says that this was his residence until at least 1922, and that back then, pool halls in Anchorage tended to be centers for illegal gambling, indicating that he had knowledge of the illegal side of the Anchorage life. Since 1915, the sale and manufacture of liquor had been prohibited in Anchorage. It was also expanded by a territorial prohibition law in 1916. At that time, there was a nationwide constitutional ban on the sale, production, importation, and transportation of alcoholic beverages that remained in effect from 1920 to 1933. Anchorage was legally dry until 1933, but the consumption of alcohol far exceeded the national average. Bootlegging was a big business, as illegal moonshine was the only liquor available. It says that Jacob Maruninko, or Jack Martian, can't remember his name, were relied upon to make deliveries in plain sight. There was a boy named John McGoy who witnessed Jack distributing liquor. He said he would get a woman to push a baby buggy with a doll that had a moonshine jug hid underneath the doll. It was reported that Marinenko made his own squirrel juice.
This is how we make the moonshine.
From an illicit moonshine still located on a large parcel of land that became one of Anchorage's largest parks. Today it's called Russian Jack Springs Park. That's why I wanted to tie it into the, one of my favorite shows, Moonshiners, because I watch that a lot, and it's kind of cool that we have a little history. I mean, I would imagine all across the world we have history of people making their own alcohol. But, moonshine to me is an American thing. They called it other stuff in Europe before it was come over here. And, the story that during Prohibition, when they were illegally making it, they did it under the light of the moon, and that's why it's called moonshine, right? So the story goes on to say that he was a squatter because not having U.S. citizenship, he couldn't own land, apparently based on, not being able to own the pool hall. So he had a couple of friends that had 160-acre parcels each that he had the run-of-the-mill on 132 acres. Well-treed land, that's what the show says, is they hide in the trees, where you can't just, it's not in the open. With the large spring that was located roughly 3 miles east of downtown Anchorage. In the 1920s, he built the cabin on it, and he got the nickname Russian Jack. It became associated with the land. Apparently, according to the General Land Office, he only had a permit to harvest timber. Due to him being an alien and not a U.S. citizen, he could not legally have obtained a patent or deed of title until a declaration of intention to become a U.S. citizen was filed with the U.S. District Court. As I said, the homesteads were actually in the names of his best friends. And although he never received legal title at hand, he set up the still and brought his product to town and made deliveries like a milkman working his route, which were said to be his regular customers were both local prostitutes and some of the town's more prominent citizens. And then during the summer, the business was run from the cabin out at Russian Jack Springs. And during the winter, he would run it out of a house on Fifth Avenue between A Street and Barrel Streets. It's, with that being illegal and prohibition, it says that he carried on outside of the law for many years, but he largely avoided trouble until 1937. The story goes on to say he met some people, a Mrs. Simmons and her two brothers, and they were he was invited to their house one evening where there was drinking. And apparently a Milton Hamilton, who was a 31-year-old taxi operator, apparently had a reputation for being rough. He arrived with a case of beer around midnight. There was a fight, apparently the quarrel was over Mrs. Simmons. And Russian Jack got beat up a little bit, breaking 2 teeth. Possibly having a fractured skull. And I guess he had left his coat and came back. Well, when he came back, I guess he got choked out from behind, or choked. Somebody tried to choke him from behind, and he pulled a gun out of his coat that he was carrying and blindly fired, which killed the Hamilton. And so there was a trial between January 10th and 17th, 1938. A jury of 11 men and 1 woman. They deliberated and found him guilty. But during the testimony, Marinenko argued that he acted in self-defense. There was a great deal of intent. There were 100 spectators in the courtroom. After 3 days, the jury deliberated all night. They found him guilty, but they also urged the judge to be lenient. The judge could have sentenced him anywhere from 1 to 20 years in prison, but gave him 2.5, where he served in the federal penitentiary at McNeil Island in Washington, which is near Seattle. After serving his sentence, he returned to Anchorage. In 1948, several businesses sponsored an advertisement in the Anchorage Daily Times encouraging people to vote for Russian Jack as the Mardi Gras King, which I want to say nowadays it's like Lord Trapper, something along those. I don't really know that history because I've never heard Mardi Gras King, but we do have a Lord Trapper, where it's, just like prom, you have a prom king and queen, princes and princesses, and we have that for Rondi. And he did not win. He actually came in last place, but he was proclaimed prince. At the age of 70, he became a United States citizen in 1954. It says that he probably moved around frequently during his last 20 years in Anchorage. From 56 to 58, he lived again with his friend Peter Toloff at 105 East 2nd Avenue, which is down in the Ship Creek area. And eventually, sometime after 1959, he moved to California, to where in 1971 he died of heart disease at the age of 88. He was placed in an unmarked grave, but later a John Bagoy visited it and put a grave marker on his grave. So with that being said, just a little bit more history of Russian Jack Springs Park. In 1943, the military presence here, the U.S. military purchased that 320 acres of land for $4,800 from the two guys that were friends of Russian Jack, and then 5 years later they sold it back to Anchorage for $16,000, which they used as a prison farm where they grew crops and stuff for a little while, and then they moved that, and then later they used it as a rehab facility, and then they moved that. I think this article says that it moved to the same facility as that prison, which today is down at the west end of the airport. I think it's the Clitheroe Center, if I'm guessing correctly. It used to be called the Point Campbell Military Reservation down there. And then, other than that, like I said, it ties this guy into squatting or homesteading on some land. And there was a creek, obviously. And he was able to make moonshine the way they show it, I guess, on that show on Moonshiners that I watch religiously, because it's so fun to watch these guys act a fool and portray how distilling happens. But as I said earlier, this whole area, Russian Jack Springs Park, is named. There is an elementary school, which is right close to East High School. There is a community council, because that's one of the community areas in town. A branch of the National Bank of Alaska, which I think was bought out. That building is now a Wells Fargo, but I think it used to be called the National Bank of Alaska back then. And then, the Russian Jack area, there is a post office, elementary school, the park where I played softball, and other things. And that's the legend of Russian Jack, or Jack Martian, or Jacob Maruninko. If you look at pictures of him, it's this traditional Western style, big thick mustache with the the curls on the ends. It's one of those images that I'm looking at. It does look like he has some tape over his nose where probably he got the severe beating he received by the guy he killed. Is part of Anchorage history, and that's the tale that is Russian Jack. So, with that being said, I am going to take another break, and I will come back and close the show. All right, welcome back. As I close this show out, I just remembered one more thing that I didn't do at the front end of the show. Here was we finally got him back, and that being Brian Hopkins, the lead singer of Elvis Monroe. They came up and did a 2-show concert. One was up at the Spur in Fairbanks, and the other one was at Coots here in Anchorage. It was nice to have him back. It's the first time I've seen him since before he and Ben had signed with Curtain Call Records to do their albums. And, matter of fact, I think it's the first time I've seen him since before he started his podcast, the Hero's Journey podcast, which I've got some news, and as soon as it happens, and I know that it's going to happen, I will keep y'all posted. But unfortunately, this trip, Benny was preoccupied. He had already had prior engagements, so he did not come. But Brian brought a guy by the name of, I think his name is Joe, and he's a phenomenal guitar player, and it was a nice acoustic set. And then later on, that concert was Elvis Monroe with Josie Scott, who was the original lead singer of the band Saliva, and that was pretty cool too, the little bit that we stayed for. So yeah, we got Elvis Monroe back in Alaska, and hopefully it happens a little bit more frequently. So with that being said, I'm kind of plugging it because Brian is one of my good friends. But yeah, check him out, Hero's Journey podcast. He's got lots of cool people on. He's had them on his show. Check him out, and check out ElvisMonroe.com. Elvis Monroe's all over Facebook. So is Hero's Journey podcast, and it's HEROES Journey podcast. So when you check it out, it's got a circular logo that's, the background's black. There's a little red in the middle, and then it says Hero's Journey in the middle, as I spelled it, HEROES Journey. And Brian Hopkins, check him out. Just get some word out there. Like I said, I did the Elvis Monroe episode. Brian and Ben are such cool dudes. I'm very, very blessed to have them as friends, and to have them be a part of my life when we do interact. But on top of that, I am the Upper One podcast. I know sometimes I say we, and I get long-winded, and I act like a jackass when I'm talking, but please like, share my episodes, my socials, and if there's anything you would like to talk about or would like me to research and talk about, please don't hesitate to send me an email. It's upper_1, the number 1, _podcast at yahoo.com. Pass it on, and thanks for joining me. Until next time.
you.